Welcome to The Point of View. Welcome back. So tonight our guest is the DG of the NDPC, Dr. Kojo Mensah Brompa. He heads a very important state agency. The agency appears understated, but a lot of times when we hit economic rats, people say, oh, where is NDPC? It's almost as if they call for you when things go bad. And when things are okay, they forget about you. Is that the issue that you
That
face?
is it. That is it. I'm sure we've been going through that several times. And especially when the rains start, the floods begin to catch everybody, and then when we are in houses, oh, the lights are going off, oh, the shortage of food, oh, the currency, and then they begin to ask, where is NDPC? But if everything is fine, NDPC goes to sleep. That's what they think.
You've been busy this past few days. I think middle of February, you were at a consultation with the Africa Center for Energy Economic Transformation.
Yes.
And you talked about the current constitutional arrangement that made the NDPC an advisory body because plans were not binding. Then you also were at Graphic last week and you were talking about coordination. So let's start with the asset thing. You're basically, so what kind of meeting was that with asset?
Well, this is a very, very important meeting. Let me say that it's a discourse we had on going forward, how NDPC and the planning in this country in general should be carried out.
Okay.
Why? Because we've had, there are three major types of plans that we do. The long term, which is looking at a perspective, a vision more or less. Then we have a medium term, which is specific within 4 years. And then we have the annual plans. All these are logically should be able to relate. And we realize that in terms of the perspective, we had one, way back in the 7-year development plan, must say is the longest. And then we had another one which was launched in the Vision 2020, for which the first plan came out to respond to that. And then we've also had the 40-year plan, which I must say is also looking beyond, 40 years up to the time will be 100 years. But in all this, we are asking ourselves, to what extent did we make use of these documents? Okay? And if we did not, why? Because we actually invested in developing these documents. So that was the first thing we looked at. To what extent did it influence, government decisions and that? Is it just a technical document, or is it also a national document for the public to consume and be able to be guided by it in terms of their decisions? So these are all the things that we looked at. And we realized that, look, in going forward, yes, we need a vision. We need a long-term perspective which will guide us as a country, and we need an established goal. Once that is done, the question we ask ourselves again, would successive governments use this instrument to guide their decisions and thereon? If that document will guide governments, what should be the content first? What should be the approval process second? And to what extent should it be a reference in terms of measuring the government's performance at any given time? If we have to do that, then we need to begin from the public, with the public. So the engagement with ASSET and other civil society groups was to really find out what is there, how do we do it, so that if we have a long-term perspective vision established, it doesn't become, belonging to one part of the population or the other, but it represents what the whole country wants to do and wants to attain at a defined time.
But Doc, is this not more an attempt to reinvent the wheel? Why am I asking this? Look, we've had Vision 2020 in the past. We've had plans put in place by the NDPC before you joined. Indeed, in the first term of this government, the Minister for Planning worked with the NDPC to synchronize the long-term plan with the government economic policy. So we've done all of that. So why do you have to go and have another meeting with ASSET to now talk about consensus? The constitution is clear. We have an NDPC. You come up with the plan. It's almost as if every 3 or 4 years we are trying to do the same thing. Why?
What we're doing this time around is not just looking at the technical process, but we're also looking at the legal process. We are also looking at the whole participatory process and who to engage in this whole process. So yes, we have a long-term plan, a perspective which looks at where we want to be, 40-year development plan that we did, but it's a very technical document for which I can engage. But what about the public that wants to relate to that? So these are some of the things, which means that we have a task to do, to be able to come out with a document, teasing it out of all this so that people can relate to it and use it to guide themselves. Again, it is not just having a document. The document must situate itself within institutions. What is the relationship of this to Parliament? What is the relationship of this to the very institution we established, Council of State? Okay. What is the relationship with this with the government itself? What is the relationship of this to the people? So we have to look at the whole institutional architecture around the implementation of this. And we're saying that there are some gaps, there are some challenges. Because if you look at one, it's very, very obvious. We have a National Development Planning Commission, and if you look at it, it prepares the plans. It defines programs. It defines government policies and all that. But you see, when it comes to directing the capital budget, for instance, it belongs more to the Ministry of Finance. So the relationship between the National Development Planning Commission, the Ministry of Finance, and even the other sectors ought to be defined very, very well. If you look at our constitution, the powers that are given to National Development Planning Commission is advisory, which sits in the presidency. So once you advise the president, that is it.
You can't force them to do what you...
No, you cannot. And it goes the same way for the sectors.
All right.
The only institution that can relate to these sectors and the president in terms of direction and in terms of, whether I should call it a penalty or not, lies more with Parliament. But then what is the relationship between the National Development Planning Commission and Parliament? So if you look at the Constitution, it doesn't define it. It is more with the executive. And what the National Development Planning Commission is supposed to do is to lay the plan. It's not even the plan, it's more of the coordinated program, which is there in 36.5. After that, that is done. The next one is report. So at the end of the year, a report is developed by National Development Planning Commission on the state of the country, also presented to Parliament. And it's up to Parliament to then take it up and relate to the executive. So if you look at this architecture, we need to take a second look.
So in terms of recommendations,
yes,
are we saying, for example, that we need a binding development plan? Are we saying, for example, we need to make the composition of NDPC a bit more politically inclusive? Are we saying we want to make the NDPC the implementing agency? I'm asking because you guys have been doing a lot of work. So give me like the top 2 constitutional changes you think we need to think about if the NDPC's work is to be felt in the country?
The first one, which is very important. Definitely, there's a lot of talk about the advisory nature of NDPC and as it relates to the presidency. Yes, the president is elected with a mandate, and therefore you cannot override. It is the mandate of the people. NDPC remains a technical institution, there's no doubt about that. But the composition of the commission is something that we need to look at critically. Sometimes, as we work, we tend to oscillate between the technical implications and the technical theme and then the political implications. And if you look at the composition of the commission now, 49 members. That reminds me, this week is the special week, is the birthday of the chairman of the commission, Professor Jan Balfour. So let me also say that before I go. And you have 49 people to deal with, different segments. One of the group are even ministers who are also part of the group. Okay, so these are all the things that we need to look at in terms of the powers given to NDPC.
So just to precise a bit,
yes,
the current composition does not include, for example, people from other political parties.
No, it doesn't.
I recall the CRC work they did under the Mills government. there was a recommendation that the NDPC's composition should include people from different political parties. I don't know if that's something that I just wanted to read that for you. I don't know if that's something that you think is worth considering.
I think not just political parties, but representation, which is closer and akin to the way the country is in terms of representation. Very, very important. Okay. Not necessarily political parties, but it has a representation which reflects the nature of our country. Very, very important. So you see that, in fact, in this commission, there are a bit of attempt to respond to that. The Secretary General of TUC, the current, president of the Bishop Conference, he was actually appointed at the time. He wasn't, but now he's been elected. Yeah. There's also representation from the business sector. But you realize that there are still areas where there are gaps.
So first recommendation, make the commission more inclusive.
Exactly.
I emphasize the politics because we've seen the discontinuities. Yeah. When a new government comes, I recall Osafo Mafo, very interesting, when the former NDPC chair, Dr. Kwesi Botwe, was presenting their work to President Akufo-Addo. It was a very cordial meeting. Yeah. President seemed very receptive. Yeah. Few weeks later, Osafo Mafo comes and says, this is not the way we want to go. And he almost sort of poured cold water on that optimism. So there's a feeling that if the political parties are more embedded in the process, if there's a new government, the guys on the commission will say, look, we've already been working on this, let's continue. I don't know whether as Director General you are able to make a comment on that type of arrangement, specifically to make sure that the issue of political continuity is addressed.
Very, very important. You know what the president said, and I always say that we should emphasize what the president said at that very time. Yeah. He said, this document has to be reviewed. All right. Okay? Reviewed, and that's important. Once you pick it, you need to review it to represent more of a dialogue between what has been done technically and what you're bringing up politically, and that has to be done. So it's normal. So I think that is what ought to be emphasized. What others said is different from what the president said.
Well, we are in a pre-election year. Yeah. Campaign has started. Yeah. This government has been, if we want a better word, they've been governing by manifesto, in the sense that whether it's free SHS, 1D, 1F, they would come and say, this is what we promised the people of Ghana in our manifesto, page 46, we are doing it. Yeah. That may not necessarily be bad. But my question to you is, now that we're in an election season, I mean, how do we address that? Because a manifesto is a catalog of promises. Yeah. A development plan is something you've thought through much deeper, and it goes beyond political cycles. How are you going to make sure that we don't get another round of fantastic promises? Whoever wins is going to continue with manifesto governance, where you need what the Singaporeans, the Malaysians, the Indonesians are doing, which seems to be the right model for us.
Yeah, Ben, let me say it this way. Sometimes we say that, but that is not the reality. Because once a manifesto is produced, let's ask ourselves, manifesto is based upon facts. Where did they get the facts? In terms of economic projections and all those things. Yeah. That's the first one. The second one is, after you produce your manifesto and you've won the election, okay, you now face the reality. How is that established? Okay, and that is where it is important to look at a plan to be able to represent and take up whatever is in the manifesto. The next stage is that if I'm a politician and I'm going to canvass for people to win, I will not go and say this is the plan that I'm implementing. Okay. Definitely, I'll bring my manifesto. So the reporting is important. Right. If I am reporting, I go by the plan. And as I said, are we going by the plan? And largely so. So if you look at it, once you win an election, we come out with a document, what we call the Coordinated Program of Economic and Social Policies. And this is where we do the harmonization. You've been elected. Once you're elected, you now come to face the reality. Okay? So you have an interface with the National Development Planning Commission and say that, look, this is what you said, this cannot be, this is not possible, this is what you said is possible, this one you have to face it out in order to be able to implement. So we do all these things. So if you look at the coordinated program, it is a combination of the current economic situation, the long-term perspective, and also whatever the president is coming out with as a vision. And this is where we rationalize. Okay.
But look, I could take you on this.
But
if you take, for example, the setting up of development authorities, which incidentally was under the Ministry of Special Development Initiatives.
Yeah, exactly.
That ministry's budget was more than education, was more than health, was more than local government. That ministry had no history. They implemented one village, one dam, implemented a lot of huge policies. Where within the medium-term development plan did we say that we're going to have a new ministry, which was going to then run the type of budget it ran, implementing such delicate programs where even the mother ministries were not having that level of budget. There's clearly a discontinuity between that medium-term development plan, and this is clearly from somebody's manifesto.
This is an institutional aspect. This is an institution. Nobody in that plan, it never talks about ministries or any of this, but it talks about the policies, the programs, and the projects. The policy was that we need a huge drive to make a difference. Having gone through all these, in the past, energy crisis and other things, and once you come, you need a big check. And the big check was an investment to make sure that these things are implemented at the local level. Usually, you have it in the plan that way. In terms of the specific strategy, the specific strategy, day-by-day strategy, belongs more to the ministries, for which the details is established by the ministries. If then the scenario is, do I establish a new ministry, or do I get the ministries to continue? That becomes a choice, not of NDPC, but it's a choice of the government. NDPC can only tell you the implication of that. Okay. And very often, that is accommodated whenever a new government is elected. A lot of experiments go on. Because even with the policies and the same programs, you would like to explore other things. And once the government explores, you realize that the government comes to the reality. Sometimes 2 years, sometimes 3 years. And if you look at our history, it has the same pattern. The only thing we are saying is that those times, NDPC must a bit more stringent in terms of monitoring and giving the feedback, coordinating, because that comes very, very vital. It becomes key. Because if you have ministries that are already undertaking these programs, and then you say that, but want of effective coordination, we have another institution, that becomes a challenge. So what we are saying is that we must be able to strengthen the ongoing institutions to be able to coordinate, so that there will never be a temptation to set up another ministry to undertake that same task.
You said during your meeting with the media house that the NDPC will focus on coordinating national projects to ensure that the issue of uncompleted projects becomes a thing of the past. How are you going to do that? You remember, I'm quite interested in uncompleted projects, because in the first time we sent a letter to the president complaining about abandoned health projects, which we estimated cost almost $1 billion. There were over 20 of them. Large projects. Some of them have been finished now. So how is the NDPC going to help resolve the issue of uncompleted projects?
You see, we saw it way back. And then in 2016, in the PFM Act, it was very specific.
Public Financial Management
Act. It came out with clear, articles on this issue. Because in the Constitution, it stated, in 35(7), you continue with the project, a new government will continue the project as far as possible, which is quite vague. So this was taken up in the Act and spelled out exactly what you are supposed to do, including coming out with an Act 2411 LI, which is on public investment management. This public investment management demands that before you start a project, in the past, let me talk about the problem before the suggestion. In the past, if you're a government and you want to, let's say, put up a hospital, if you're able to mobilize, 40% of the real resource, you could start. What about, so if you start and the 40%, you are not able to, with the assumption that you are going to mobilize more. If you are not able to mobilize, the 40% get there. It stops. The contractor is not waiting. For each year that you are not able to invest, the contractor is varying the cost and charging. And so, but if you needed just 1 million for the hospital, 1 million Ghana cedis, it could go to, 2-3 million for the same fund. So what this act has helped is that you can only start a project when you have the full outflow, cash outflow of it, which is already there for us in 24/11. And it was very specific. Set up a committee which will monitor this and approve. And the committee, fortunately, NDPC is there with the committee. And you have the public procurement, it's also the EPA, private, consultants who are savvy in project analysis and all that. And so this committee looks at that. We realized that the committee was set up in 2020. So we had a 4-year, gap between the act and the LI and the implementation. And since the time we started, I sit on the committee, and then I've been privy to the issues of coordination, the issues of sequencing, the issues of financial flow. So coming back to NDPC, this is what I brought to the commission, that if we're able to focus on this coordination and sequencing of projects, it will save us a lot of money. We already have a legal, backing, and that is why we're going by doing this.
This is the point of view. My guest is the DG of the NDPC, Dr. Kojo Mensah Brompa. He has said a lot of important things, two of which I would highlight. He says that if we made the NDPC more inclusive, it would make their plans more acceptable across government. That's a big point. He also says that since 2020, there's been a committee that has been looking at the way projects are executed in a sense as to prevent abandoned projects using the public financial management. When we come back, we'll talk about the current economic situation we're in and whether the NDPC has any suggestions for us as to how to get out of this economic rut. Stay with us.
Africanacity is using plastic waste to provide affordable homes.
Pepsodent introduces charcoal and lemon essence. The unique combination of natural essences whitens teeth naturally for you and family because every smile matters. New Pepsodent Herbal. Introducing a unique combination of herbal extracts in an antibacterial toothpaste for strong teeth and healthy gums that protects your family and you. Every smile matters.
Haven't you heard?
EGL's Ramadan Easter promotion.
Electroland Ghana Limited is offering you quality products from Samsung, Toshiba, Nasco, and Media. Choose your choice. Media AC, Samsung AC, Nasco AC. With 229 Ghana cedis, get yourself a Nasco gas stove. Buy one, get one free. So stocks last. With 1,099 Ghana cedis, a Nasco television is yours. Grab your TV ranging from 32 inches, 40 inches to 98 inches. I tell you.
Simply put it, all types of refrigerators and washing machines, microwaves, and sound bars are available this Easter and Ramadan.
Electroland Ghana Limited Easter promotion. Don't let this opportunity pass you by.
Welcome back. This is still the point of view. Tonight we're talking to the DG of NDPC, Dr. Kojo Mensah Brompa. They were in the news on Friday, and they said they can solve the problem, or they can help solve the problem of abandoned projects. And if I hear you, you're saying, based on the Public Financial Management Act, there's supposed to be some committee that's put in place to sort of monitor and coordinate certain activities, and therefore that's going to reduce the wastage in the system. I recall you also saying that the NDPC has a number of problems, including issues of coordination, overlaps in implementation stages of development, and a few other things. You're saying that the coordination role, you can play it better. You, the NDPC, can play the coordination role better. Is this at the district level or the national level? Because it seems as if the national level doesn't only formulate, they want to implement. Whereas, based on a little understanding of local governance I have, the districts is the one supposed to implement development.
Exactly.
Is that where you want to step in to solve?
Yes, I must say that it is our defined responsibility. If you look at right from the Constitution through all the acts which establish NDPC, it's very clear that it plans, it coordinates, it facilitates implementation, it also monitor and evaluate and then report back. These are the functions. So coordination is very, very important. It is not just coordinating so you at the national level, but also at the local level. So you have what we call the horizontal coordination, which sits more with the sectors. So education, how does it relate to health? How does it relate to roads and highways? How does it relate to ports? And it's said that in nation building, the linkage is very important. Okay. If you want to promote agriculture, you can never do it without roads.
All right.
You can never do it without looking at our water resource. You can never do it without looking at energy. So it is for industry. You can never do it without looking at our primary production. What do we do in terms of mining, in terms of agriculture, and all those things? So they are very, very important. If you talk about industrialization, for instance, the biggest ingredient, which has been a challenge for us for a very long time, has to do with skills.
Okay.
And skills falls rightly into education and training. So that is the horizontal linkage that we're trying to do. And we've already begun meetings and...
Let's make it practical.
Yeah.
You gave a scenario that, let's assume the NDPC wants to improve sanitation at the beach.
Exactly.
And apparently there are over five. So the Ministry of Tourism would say they have a role.
Yeah.
Water resources and sanitation will say they are the people who do sanitation.
Exactly.
Local government will say they manage districts.
Yes.
So they will be the ones to be given the resources.
Exactly.
Ports and harbors will say, well, this is a seafront, it's our business. Fisheries will also say, so in a scenario like this, how does the NDPC resolve the issue of lack of coordination using this case study? So
you realize that this is where we bring the ministry to be able to discuss defined roles, responsibilities, and define resource which will enable you to undertake your defined responsibility. And then we need to have a ministry which will be the executor to bring the others together. This is very, very important. And it's an experience. Almost all the development partners and other countries, they practice that. So that you move from just, line item implementation to real program and results. And this is the kind of discussion we've already started with the ministry. We've already had a meeting with the PPME directors, planning, programming, and monitoring evaluation directors. And this problem, it came from them, basically. They brought out all these challenges and problems and all these overlaps throughout the meeting. The other thing which also came up is data, information. If you want to coordinate, you need information because you need to look at activities and the result of that and how much is required in terms of resources to be able to do that. You also only need to also monitor the scheduling because one institution's output could be another's input, which means that if you delay in executing the output, it's going to hang on till the other institution might be there but waiting. So all these are things that we need to look at, and there are critical tools which economists and planners know that can be used to do this. We learn it, we know it in theory, but putting it in practice very often becomes, and this is what we really want to do. So we've instituted a quarterly meeting of all these directors who are responsible for planning, programming, monitoring, and evaluation of the various ministries. And the very first meeting was very successful. They came out with the problem, the challenges, and why they are not able to do that and all that. We're moving to the second stage where we'll begin to then link up in terms of articulation, your sequence, what programs are you undertaking this year? How is it related to the other ministry? What are your key inputs? Where are they coming from? Who is delivering it? So these are all things that we need to look at. It is a bit complex, but practically, this is the way we need to go to avoid waste. We are also adapting the use of, computer and some of these tools, which are already there. Critical path analysis, Gantt chart, cross area in terms of input, output analysis. We are using all this to make this comfortable. The technical people already know it. It's a matter of application. The other thing is the vertical aspect. From the from the ministry or the national level to the regions to the districts, there is always a challenge. There is always a temptation, because that's what we've been doing in the past, for ministries to go all the way down to communities to implement.
Okay.
And it doesn't help. It doesn't help. I always ask myself, if there's an NCCE person in my district, in my unit, who can communicate and bring out the information to the people, because the person knows the particular language to use to be able to reach the people. And you move from Accra and go down there and say, I'm going to do dissemination at the community level, definitely you will come back without making any impact. So these are practical. How do we make use of the system that we have? The national concentrates on policy, the regions concentrate on monitoring, evaluation, and coordination, the district focus on implementation.
You know what's interesting? So, whereas on paper we are having more districts, and we even have a new organization headed by Dennis Abuaji, which is like
the IMCC.
Yeah, on paper it seems as if we are reducing the size of the unit. We are having more districts, yet it seems as if the executive is still in charge of implementation. So it's like an irony. You are creating more districts, yet you are empowering the center to do bigger ticket items. So for example, when it comes to spraying, fumigation, you have it centrally procured, whereas you have different districts with different needs. That's a sort of a disconnect and an irony. I don't know how you intend to resolve that.
These are very, very important. You'll be surprised. In our investigation, we identify that if you go to a typical DCE and you say that, well, there's this national program, do you know about it? Even if the DCE knows about it, the person will tell you no. Why? Because the key thing is who procured. Who actually procured?
So he doesn't own the project.
No,
it's not our business. That one is the headquarters.
That is it. So this is where we need to resolve that. What can be done to bring about, an advantage of scale? Yes, you do it at the national level. But what can be done? That is the principle of subsidiarity. If it can be done at the local level, let it be done there. And what you can do at the national level is to take up that responsibility of broad policy development. And until we are able to do this horizontal linkage and this very vertical in terms of responsibilities and roles, it might be very, very difficult. We don't need to go far to find cases and good cases of it, of this, in some countries in Africa, some countries in Asia and others who have been able to break through. The basic thing is define rules, define responsibilities, and then directed resources to be able to carry this out so that they can report and also be accountable. If I go to a DCE, a project in the person's district, and the person says, I don't know about it, it's an indictment on my institution, it's an indictment on all of us as a country.
I see.
Because the person's space is what the person manages. And for the person to say that I do not know anything about it, it's a big indictment on us.
So there are about 4 main problems with development planning in Ghana. Discontinuity in planning, you've dealt with that. Inconsistency in policies and policy formulation and coordination, you just dealt with that. But there's one I thought you should comment on before we talk about the economy. Favoring short-term fiscal projects over long-term structural reform. So I don't know whether it's the elections that make that possible. People want roads, they want houses, they want this and that, as against something that transforms the economy structurally. Is it the government or the people that's responsible for this short-termism that has beleaguered our economy for decades?
It's both. Because the psychologists will tell you that expectations also create the delivery and the means. So we tend to think in a cycle of 4 years. It's all of us. All of us.
We all think in 4 year cycles.
We've been programmed into 4 year cycles. So long-term issues, you might be a very good government, dealing with all the long-term issues and putting the structural things in place. But it will be a risk in our political system. That's how we've created it. And therefore, every government needs to balance off. Because I always say that the NDPC has done all the analysis around this, written, policy, advisory documents and all that. But the key thing is that we produce raw materials, which are primary. We have a lot of minerals, which are natural. And if you look at our industrial sector, you realize that there's basically no relationship between what we are generating as primary goods and what we are producing. And so all our primary goods are exported, sent out in a raw form. Once we send it out, it is converted, and we are sending 80% of the jobs and the gains out. Then it comes back to the service sector.
Okay.
And then the service sector then begins to do the trading and the wholesaling and everything. So you realize that while the primary sector is growing, the service sector is also growing because they are receiving from outside. And the sector which is facing the challenge is manufacturing and industry. And that is where the jobs are created. Because the service sector relies more on technology and very few things, so they don't create the jobs. And therefore, this is a kind of cycle we need to break. It has been since Gordonsburg, and we're still struggling with it. Why can't we break it? The point here is that if you want to break it, you need to redirect your skills. You need to redirect your investment. You need to redirect your technology. And it might not, produce quick things for people to see visibly. And therefore, that becomes a challenge. It means that if you're a government and you really want to change these structural things, you need to take a big risk to do that. And we've been going around it. So I always let me give the example of one district, one factory. This is fantastic. It's a response to converting the primary produce that we have over here, but we still have all these agricultural gluts. Why? Because a factory is built to produce pineapple, and then we produce the pineapple from our farm for 3 months. What happens after that? And then you go to where I come from, Orange. I mean, children use it to play ball on the street because when the season is there, everything is around Orange. And then we have factories which are here, which also produce this orange for 3 months. And then the course of the year, what happens? So there must be that linkage to be able to do that so that we can have a full season production, a full year production.
You are speaking like a man in pain. It's like, this is not that difficult. This is so obvious. And you are at NDPC, but it looks like you are not the implementing agency, so you can only recommend. And it's a bit frustrating. Should we make the NDPC the implementing agency? Indeed, the CRC, most Ghanaians didn't think that was the solution. And in fact, many countries don't have that. But it seems as if you have a lot of technical people. Should we give you the country for 2 years to implement these policies, and then we bring the politicians back to see what they can do?
Not that. We work along, because planning is two things: political, technical, interface. But the key thing is that, you see, institutions cannot work in isolation. We work together. And I'm very sure that if you create a platform where all these things work together, we'll be able to go through. And that's what we are pushing, working together. Seeing to it that if I'm working in trade and industry, it is not just trade and industry. The person working in agriculture is providing raw material. The person working on road is providing the means and access. The person working at the port is to make sure that whatever you produce and process, there is a means for you to get it out. You know, we read sometimes the news, a glut in tomato production in Passau, in Salaga, yam, and all these things. And I asked myself, I saw it when I was a kid. When I was a child, you produce cassava, send it to markets in Cape Coast, and the market women will wait till 5 o'clock. And then they'll come and ask you, they use their feet to ask you of the price, because you can't take it back. So we virtually give it to them. It's a gift. You know, any amount that you offer me. And, you know, and this is about 50 plus years after that. And the same thing is happening. So I'm asking myself, what happened? Tomato, you go to, you know, neighbors, and all that they do, they have solar cooling systems, such that if a market woman, I bring my tomato, I don't get a good price, I can get a place to keep it, at least for the next market. So these are simple things, and it doesn't take much. And if you go to a lot of our technological institutions, they can produce this. They can produce this. So what is happening?
What is the problem? We'll try and see if we know. We'll be back. This is the point of view. Tonight, we're reflecting on the economy. And, you know, it's important every so often to have a long-term view. And my guest is Dr. Kojo Mensah Brompa, who's the NDPC DG. And you can tell that it feels like this thing is not rocket science. But, of course, he's a technocrat. He's at NDPC. trying hard to make sure that successive governments implement the important things. We'll come back and look at some of them when we return. Stay with us.
Creamy Plus is a fully skimmed evaporated milk. Creamy Plus is available in a shop near you.
This message has been vetted and approved by the FDA.
Finally, anyone can become a household.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Hugo Flip, a real estate gaming platform that allows you to play and stand a chance of winning a house or cash or consolidated prizes, such as savings towards a house. Simple and easy to play. Visit www.hugoflip.com. Buy a ticket to enter the game. Wait for the end of the game to enjoy the win. Anyone can win. Flip it or own it. Hugo Flip. This advertisement has been vetted and approved by the Gaming Commission of Ghana. Play responsibly, not for persons below 18 years, and gaming can be addictive.
Welcome back to the point of view. Tonight we're talking to an economist, a development planner, DG of the NDPC. I need to tell you that every major discussion about the economy ends up with the NDPC. So whether it's even fixed the country, eventually people will say one of the reasons why we're where we are is because things keep happening in cycle. I'll give you an example. This is our 17th attempt to go to the IMF. And I mean, for want of a better word, that seems like a student who's not learning. Because you go to the IMF as almost like a lender of last resort, right? And so the question about current economic challenge, the haircuts we're getting, the attempt to go to IMF that's not working, how bad are things compared to previous times? I'm told this is the worst in 40 years. I don't know if you agree.
Well, let me say that this might not be the worst if you look at the figures and the indices compared to the early 80s and then late 90s. And then the earliest part of the 2000s, we also had very, very serious, figures there. So it might not be. The other good side, relatively, of the current situation is that we haven't registered that kind of hardship related to, the last two, in terms of its effect, the social effect. And why? Because within the period, a lot of Ghanaians have built a bit of resilience, and therefore it might not be. But let me say that the 17 times, if you do the analysis, it will tell you that some might have been repeated for the same reason, but many are also varied. There might be different reasons all along why we go to the IMF, all the 17, and therefore that is a challenge. There is only one period, I think there's a defined period of 5 years where we did not go at all. And
so in almost every 4 years we've gone.
Exactly.
But whatever the reason, inevitably it's either a fiscal challenge or some structural need. So basically you need money. So your program is either, and most of the programs they give you some level of money or debt forgiveness. So you can say that there are things that repeat themselves in our economy.
The economists will tell you. This one is I call the economist 101. It is structural. Structure in the sense that it is the structure that lets you build resilience, such that at any difficult time, you'll be able to fall on the things that you've been able to reserve. Our structural system is weak. And I must say that you can never be and develop when you still rely on primary production as the major contributor to your the economic structure. You cannot. Again, we are also not emphasizing where jobs can be created. And so long as you are utilizing your human resource, it means that there's a key segment of the economy you are neglecting. That is important. So, and the third area has to do with the whole institutional setup and the way it works.
Okay.
We define it simply as management. But the institutional structure, we've been tinkering with it even since independence. Structure, if you look at the way our institutions are, they are not very different from what we had way back in the early 60s and the 50s. And that is it. So we need to look at these three areas very, very well. The structure, the fiscal system. And
so in terms of the structure, are you talking about, for example, the emphasis on agric services manufacturing, where we spend a lot of, we're doing agric and we move to servicing without going through the trajectory of manufacturing? That's the first issue.
A lot of economists will agree with W.W. Dosto said, wrote about this in the 50s. That you see, if you want to move through the development path, very few countries are able to jump and make it. But even when they jump, they rely on a buffer, often coming from outside. So primary must be able to relate to our manufacturing. What are the things that we need? We need skills. We need capital. We need institutional setup which supports that. We need also not only that, but we also need the kind of investment pattern which supports that. You see, you cannot go for a short-term loan and use it to finance a structural change. You definitely, we all know it. You cannot go for a short-term loan and use it for transformation. You can only use it for change, but not to transform. Because transformation requires that you are able to access a funding for which, for about 10 to 20 years, you are using it in the production.
So which brings to your second point on the financing.
Exactly.
So you can't do structural change without proper financing.
Exactly.
So in terms of development finance, where are we? So we need more AFDB type organizations, infrastructure, long-term lending, and not this short-termist.
That is it. You can study it. All the countries in the world have gone through that. And those who have been able to make it, they have a source, which is long-term.
Long-term structural financing. So African Development Bank should be
very, very
the
critical.
type of place you should be looking at. Institutions like that.
Very, very critical. Because, look, our railway system is primary in our production process. And way back in 1903, they thought about it. We are in 2023. We still have just less than, 50 kilometers of our railway system working. We're happy we have in Pakadan, which is 100 kilometers, but not yet being used. Not yet. But that is it. But we need to have it as a primary thing. You cannot go for a short-term loan to construct and develop a railway system. No. Because you need a time to construct it. You need a time for it to go to a fair cycle of trying to establish itself. And then you repay. Which means that if you go for a loan for 5 years, 6 years, definitely you are out. You only tinker with the system. Our road system, primary road access is key. If you want to develop, double road from Accra to Tamale, a double lane road, it's not a loan of 6 years.
So we need to deal with the question of finance.
Our structure is very, very financial structure is very, very important. What do we go for? At what point? You see?
And then you come to the institution as the third point.
The institution is critical. We must have defined roles, defined responsibilities, and most importantly, predictability, because that's what the private sector wants. That these institutions are predictable. When I take it there, I'm getting it at this time. And the private sector would incorporate that in their plans. But when they go there and they always get excuses and shocks and unanticipated things, you make them unstable and they cannot compete because they are competing with other countries which are predictable. And that is key. That brings us the use of technology. So that I can sit in my office and do this without getting up. If you go to China, they will tell you many big businessmen and even those who are in charge of logistics, they've never seen their ports. They sit in office and transact. I'm even talking about China.
You don't need to go and hustle with freight forwarders.
No.
Sweat.
No.
Everything is automated.
Automated, and you do that and accomplish it. And you are competing with the same person. You see, so that is it. Our institutional system must be such that this is predictable. I can get. Sometimes people come to NDPC, they want a particular information, and I feel very sad because I ask myself, this should have been something that I could have provided, but I don't have it.
So let me try and summarize what you said. You said we need a structural transformation, which the vision can capture.
Yes,
but we need a financing vehicle that will deliver that transformation.
Exactly.
And to efficiently allocate that financing, you need institutions that are professional. So those are your top
major
three
ones.
things for
major
change
ones
in the country.
And it's not just I as a director general.
The research has proved this.
This has been proved. NDPC, we have what we call policy discussions.
Yeah.
And a lot of that hangs around this. And I must say that within the last one, institutional aspect is also data. Information. The institutional aspect also includes data and information. And we're fortunate. The Ghana Statistical Service is doing very, very well, coming out with information and data. But we need to bring it out. We are responsible. Once they bring it out, we need to apply it. But we're still taking decisions without taking this data, rich data what they provided, in making decisions, in predicting, in projecting, both the private sector and the public sector. So the institutions that are responsible must be able to link and define our future course based on data.
But is that not a function, when I come to the issue of continuity and discontinuities, is the issue of long-term policy implementation not a function of also the changes we see? So for example, new king, new law. In some countries, there's a civil service that's the bed of implementations. But here, a new president can appoint up to 6,000 people at various levels, so that if he comes in and he's thinking, I'm NDC or I'm MPP, he's not really thinking about the long-term national. He's thinking about what this government wants to do. Is that not one of the ways in which we've also dented institutions, where there are very few positions that you can say are sacrosanct civil service? There are a lot of political appointments coming, and it's a big worry for people in civil society.
So it comes to our own institutional architecture. You see, who manages the institutions in this country? Civil service or quasi-civil service? There's a Public Service Commission, which is at the umbrella of managing this. And I must say that for the last 4 years, or what I've seen, it's been quite good. People have been transferred not because it's a punishment, but because they want them to use their skills to its fullest ability. This has been managed very well. I saw the civil service way back in the 90s and others. I'm seeing the civil service now, and it's different. The emphasis is on the personal management, institutional setup, training, and you could see it. You could see this happening. The point here is that how do we interpret this in such a way that they take up their responsibility without looking at whoever is there politically? And this is where the issue is. But I must say that this is also a period where I've seen the heads of institutions really working from one government to another. Yes, many chief directors. They've only retired at their age. Some of them had worked even with 4 governments.
Really?
Yes.
Because recently when they gave the awards for the It Lost thing, there was a lot of feeling that the people who did a lot of the work were not acknowledged. In fact, the former Attorney General even refused the award. Mr. Fuchikata as well did not turn up. Although initially we saw the 2 Attorney Generals crossover working, it seemed as if the politics took over. So there's a lot. I mean, this was Ghana's oil find.
I am happy it was only at the top. But those down there are the same people there. You go to Attorney General Department, you basically see those same faces. Yes.
But if the people at the top are political appointees, they obviously determine the direction.
You see? But they also do it on the advice. If you have a good civil service, strong civil service, I tell you, and a civil service that is confident and can deliver, it will be our biggest asset. Yeah, you have it changing in so many countries. They change. Those are the top
now they do more politics than even the politicians. There's a lot of politics there.
It also depends. You know, if you see them as civil servants, they will also see you as a good politician. But if you come and see them as politicians, they will also
exhibit their political side. How long have you been at NDPC, by the way?
Well, this is my 4th year.
Because you are the Ministry of Planning.
Planning, yes.
And then you sort of...
Ministry of Planning 2017 and NDPC 2019.
So you've been in this for at least 6 years?
Yes.
I see. Did you see the people at NDPC as civil servants or politicians?
I saw them as civil servants. The fortunate thing is that I started my professional work, way back in 1991. I had a stint at NDPC, went to lecture at the university, then came back to NDPC in 2002.
Oh, so you've had a long stint with
them,
so they know you.
So I know.
So you are an NDPC person.
Exactly.
Over many administrations.
Exactly. So I saw I was there for 5 years before I left to.
When will Ghana's economy recover? Give me a prediction. 2023, things are tough.
I remember there's a friend who is in the economic sector, and he asked me that same question. I say that, well, we are recovering.
We are recovering.
Yes.
I see. Maybe by the time I bring you back next year or later in the year, who knows?
And I am very, very hopeful.
You are hopeful?
Very hopeful. We'll be there.
We'll be there?
Yes.
Even though you didn't give me a date. Dr. Kojo Mensah-Abrapa, great talking to you. Very, very refreshing economic ideas, long-term planning, monitoring, coordination, all those beautiful things that we are told. The devil is in the implementation. Yes. Hopefully, those who are listening know what to do. Thanks for watching. My name is Bernard Avle. We'll be with you next time. Bye-bye.
Some children have two parents who do all that they can to make life comfortable. Some children have only one parent who toils to provide food, clothing, and shelter. And some